The journey worth taking is the journey within you. Everybody has their own story and their own journey to share. Every journey conceals another journey within its lines, the path not taken and the forgotten angle. The journey within you, where you will listen to stories from others sharing their triumphs and struggles that led them to where they are today. Welcome to the Journey Within You. Today I have a special guest, Misty, and I met her. Well, I haven't actually met her, but have connected with her through Amy Paul, who we both adore. Is she not an amazing woman?
Oh yeah,
I just love her, and
love her.
I love her stories. And if you're not following her on IG, you need to be, because her stories will capture you. Every day I look forward to seeing what's happening on the farm and in her homes that she's creating, all these bed and breakfast places and things she's doing. It's so fun.
Yes.
But I was connected on one of her stories she posted of reading a manuscript of yours, and I thought, I need to contact her. I need to have her on here to tell her journey within her. And so, Misty, take it away, girl. Tell me your story.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Um, so yes, Amy Paul, she posted about a book that I currently am getting ready to publish, and it's called He Was Always There: How a Girl's Life Clouded by Trauma, Addiction, and Abuse Was Restored by God's Love.
Mm,
So
that's
um,
big.
it's it's been a journey, but so I was born in Iowa, and I moved to Phoenix, Arizona when I was 6 years old. And so I grew up as an only child, and I pretty much ruled and reigned in my home. My parents loved me unconditionally, but in an unhealthy state. And
Mm,
so I had the master bedroom for a portion of my life when I wanted it. And so
mm-hmm.
that just goes to show whatever I wanted, I got. Um, I always wanted more. And
Right.
so I can't really remember a time in my childhood when I was happy or satisfied, but I didn't really know why, right? I
Mm,
didn't understand what was wrong with me. Most of my life, I felt alone. I felt like I didn't belong. And that's really because for 20 years, my parents lied to me. And at 20, they told me I was adopted.
oh,
And
wow.
so those 20 years of that secret, of them keeping the secret, and people would ask all the time. They would say, "Are you adopted? Are those your parents?" Um, and my parents would just say, "Yeah, no, you're not adopted. We had you." And I mean, it was just
Oh, that had to be devastating.
constantly. It
Devastating.
it was because I didn't feel like I belonged, but everybody told me I did.
Right.
And
You knew
so
something was off.
right. And my parents both had 8 brothers and sisters. So we had a very big family, and they all lived in
Mm,
the Midwest. And
mm-hmm.
so I wasn't really with them. But when I would visit and we would have reunions, I really did stick out like a sore thumb. It was just, I was this olive skinned girl, and nobody else was. And
Huh.
so,
Yeah.
so this led me to, in my teen years, I was always searching and making bad decisions,
Mm,
and also just not I was a straight A student. I was a good kid,
yeah.
but my childhood, um, I never had people directing me. I spent my we didn't go to church, and my parents lived their life in bowling alleys, playing bingo. Um, that's those are the people that I saw.
Right.
So
Right.
I was, by the age of 12, I was stealing from stores with my cousins. I
Mm,
was using swear words. I was sneaking wine coolers or whatever from the
mm-hmm.
refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
These are just things that we did. And
Right.
I was a latchkey kid of the 80s. My parents both worked. And so
You were setting your
um,
own standards.
yeah, I was, and I just really felt like all the things I was doing are just things that adults do.
Mm-hmm.
And just like kids today, they all
Mm-hmm.
cuss behind
Mm-hmm.
closed doors because their parents do. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I was. And so at 12, I had met a friend, and she took me to church with her, and I started to learn about morals and values.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily a relationship with the Lord, but going to church. It was a Mormon church,
Mm-hmm.
and I did that for about that was about 10 years of my life. But when I started at 12, she was the first person to say, "Hey, don't say the Lord's name in vain, or don't say those words. That's just not good. You shouldn't steal. You shouldn't lie. All these
Mm,
basic things that
right, that
that,
you've
that
been
a
doing.
lot of kids, I just didn't even know that. I mean, I knew it was wrong, but not really.
Right,
Like
right,
what
right.
is wrong about it? I
Yeah,
didn't have a standard. So I started going to church. I got a little bit better my high school years. Um, let's see. So my high school years, I started veering off, right? Because my
yeah,
parents weren't church people. So,
right.
while the Mormons teach, don't date non-members. Well, I didn't see any value in that rule or
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that. So I, of course, got a boyfriend that wasn't Mormon, and then I just kind of went off. And
Right.
so um, I made some bad choices in my freshman year, and I was raped early in my freshman year,
Mm,
and
mm.
by a senior, but I didn't tell anybody.
No,
And
keep it.
so
Yeah.
when that happened, that just really I really disengaged from a lot of things, but nobody really knew why, right?
Right,
I just
right. You just, oh, a
disengaged.
teen.
I
You're a
I
teen.
didn't, yeah,
Yeah,
right. I didn't even know why. I mean,
yeah.
it took me many years of looking back.
To
This is
find
me
that. Yeah.
talking about, being healed. Um, and so going through that, my senior year, now I've had a boyfriend for like 3 years. Half of my class, I have scholarships to go. So I could go to any universities. I had been taking like classes at the community college on the summer. So I was driven, I was determined, I wanted to do things in life. But my senior year, I turned 18 in December of my senior year. And I was excited for that because I hadn't worked any of my high
Mm,
school. My parents were always like, "Hey, you can't have a job. You need to focus." Um, and so when I turned 18, I was like, "I'm getting a job." Like
yeah.
I just kind of was like that. Even though if my kids were to do that, I'd be like, "What are you thinking?
Yeah,
You're still
yeah,
living in my house." But
yeah.
I beat to a different drum, right? I'm the
Mm-hmm,
one who ruled. And
mm-hmm.
so I was like, when I turned 18, there was this, I wanted to be a nurse for the longest time. So
Oh,
there was this class for certified nursing assistant,
mm-hmm.
and it was over Christmas break, and it was 2 weeks, 40 hours each week, and you had to be 18. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I want to do that, and I want that to be my job.
Mm-hmm.
They had this double weekends thing. I was like, I could do that, and then I could work on the weekends, and then I still have school during the week. This was my
Right,
plan.
right.
And so my parents allowed it, and they were just like, well, if your grades drop, we'll have to blah blah blah, whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, my grades don't drop. And so I took that class, and I started doing that in January. I got a job at the local nursing home that my aunt had worked at,
Right.
and I was excited. But this opened a whole different world. Now I'm
Mm-hmm.
working with people 20 and older. I was the only 18-year-old, right? I was the youngest,
Young. Yeah,
most.
yeah,
I liked that I could make 7.50 an hour, and
yeah.
back then that was a
A
lot,
lot of money. Yeah, I did the same
right?
thing. I was a
It
CNA.
was, yeah, and
Yeah.
it was not
It
what I
was
thought
not a
it
good,
was,
yeah, it's a
but
hard job. It is a hard
it was a
job.
hard job.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, yes, it was
Yes.
hard, and so I started doing that, and kind of hanging out with different people. But spring break of my senior year, I took a trip. So every summer I would go to Illinois and
Mm.
visit family. That's
Mm-hmm.
where all the family was, and my parents worked all the time. So to offset not being home all summer,
You would go visit.
I
Yeah.
would go
Get
there for
away.
a month
Mm-hmm.
and visit family. And so it was spring break, and I just needed to get away. There was like work and school, and I was my boyfriend, and there was just so much, and I
Mm-hmm.
was feeling overwhelmed. And so I took this trip, and um, when I was there, the first morning that I was there, I was at a home, a friend, and my friend's husband, who I'd known for many years, he just came in, and he was just like, "Hey, I'm so glad you're finally 18. Oh my gosh, I've waited so long for this." And he was always kind of a joker, and so I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, "Whoa, this isn't really funny." This
Yeah.
isn't funny. The kids were in school. His wife was working, And I just thought, this is not a funny joke, and he was just like, oh, come on, have you been with a real man yet?
Oh
I
man.
was like, what? And
Yeah.
I just thought, no, no, I don't. And he's like, oh, come on. And after a bit, it was just like, it just turned out like, well, if you don't, I'm going to tell this
Yeah.
and that. And I was 18 and
Right.
young, and,
Scared.
I wish I had the brain I had today, but I
Exactly.
didn't.
But we
So
didn't. Yeah.
right. And so I laid there and allowed it to happen.
Mm.
And I got up and left that day. I don't even remember if I went and told my friend, like, I actually don't remember how I got back home
Mm.
to like, it's
Oh, a
really a
blur.
blur.
Yeah.
Um, and it just, and so I got back home, and it was like the weekend before I started back to school, and my parents were just like, okay, we have 9 weeks left of school. If you need to make sure you stay focused, blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, if one more threat, like if you say it again, I'm just going to bring my backpack out here and I'm going to set it at your feet. And then I'm going to call a friend and I'm going to walk out
And
the
I'm
front
done.
door
Yeah.
and I'm done. I'm not coming back. And my mom just couldn't help it. And she's just like, well, okay, but if I'm just saying, if you, and I walked in my room and I got my backpack and I put it at the floor.
Wow.
And then I called a friend because we don't have cell phones then,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was
We have to
calling
call from the
like,
house.
hey, come pick me up because I wasn't even going to try to take my car because just I didn't want that control
Right.
because I
Right.
had a car and I paid the payment for it. My parents financed a car for me. Stupid. Like I'm thinking I would never do that for my kids, but
Yeah.
I had the job and so I was like, oh, I can pay this money a month or whatever. So in my mind it was my car, but it
Right.
wasn't in my name, right?
Right.
And so they just had this power. And so I was like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not taking the car. I'll go with a friend. Of course, they didn't take me seriously. I did end up, my friend came and got me. I went to her house and she happened to have a guy friend there of hers. His name was Randy. And suddenly he's just a friend. We connected, we were talking,
Mm-hmm.
and my friend, his friend and some other friends had some crystal meth
Mm.
and they were talking about getting high and he didn't do that kind of stuff, but I was like, ooh, I'd always heard of that drug,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'd always heard it was
Mm-hmm.
the skinny drug, and I had never, up to this point, I had never done drugs or
Mm.
tried. I didn't even hang out with people like that
Right.
or even want to. It just
Right.
wasn't even but I did always hear about that drug, and I was like, ooh, I could, oh, I want to try that, why not?
Yeah.
And but I didn't even think like
That
up
it would
until
be
that point,
something that
I
would.
had always said no, but
Yeah.
I had always said no.
Ah.
It wasn't even a thing. But this day, I was like, sure, why not?
Oh gosh.
And I tried it, and I really liked it.
Mm.
And so this guy Randy, he just he was an only child, and he wanted out of his house too. And so crazy enough, we go driving around and find an apartment together.
Oh
This
my
is how
goodness.
crazy, like, I know,
Yeah.
it's like nuts. I call my 18th year my downward spiral. It was just from
Mm.
one thing to the next.
To the
And
next.
so that day we went and found an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, because we were just friends.
Right.
Nothing was, we weren't
Right.
really, and found a 2-bedroom apartment, moved in to move in the next day, and this was all just happening. Went home. My mom is in hysterics. She tells me I can have the car because she's realizes I was
Yeah,
serious.
you were serious.
So because she wants to be in my life and she's afraid of me not
Right.
coming back,
Right.
she's trying to be supportive. You can have your car, and of course I'm like, yay, great! I need a car. I can't.
Mm.
I wasn't sure what I was gonna do without it. I wasn't even thinking. I was just
Yeah.
like kind of driven, and I was done.
Yeah.
And so we moved into the apartment. It was a rough relationship. It ended up being a relationship. Fast forward 2 months,
Mm.
this guy dies in a rollover car accident.
Oh goodness.
Okay, dies in a rollover. Yes. I then dive into drugs and just I'm for the next couple months. I have people from high school all coming over, all like baseball team, all these
Mm.
guys
Mm.
trying to console, but we just end up sleeping together.
Mm-hmm.
And this just goes on. Like I'm dead. I want
Mm-hmm.
to die.
Mm-hmm.
It was the end of the world. I thought, why did they, why did he have to die? What am I going to do? Why don't you take me?
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of, like, I just was done.
Mm-hmm.
And I would let dealers stay in my home
Mm.
just so I could have free drugs. They
Mm.
slept in my bed. I could have all the meth that I wanted. Um, and so then, and one of the dealers, he ends up getting me a job at this strip joint. I realized I didn't like that at all. Like, I'm just game. I'm just, sure, I'll try that.
Oh
Sure, I'll
my,
try
you're
that.
just going at it.
Yeah, and then I started at an escort service, and I was like, oh, this isn't bad. This is enough money to keep,
To pay for
make great
everything.
money. I can
Mm-hmm.
pay for my bills. I get all these, so it was working. And
Mm.
I did that so my boyfriend died in May, and then June, July, August was kind of this 3 months of uh, it was bad. There were nights that I was out roaming the apartment, knocking on doors.
Oh gosh.
I was just like up for days, down for
For
days. I didn't
days.
ever want to sleep. If I had drugs, I did them. So I
Mm.
wasn't a functioning addict at this time. I was a completely just off the wall. Meanwhile, my high school is calling saying, hey, come here, just come sign this paper, Misty, and you can graduate. Come sign this paper, because I was even missing 9 weeks.
Mm.
I was still able to graduate, but I didn't ever go. So I didn't even think I graduated for like 10 years. But
Wow.
then anyway, so now we're in like September, and my ex-boyfriend of 3 years comes to visit and brings a friend. And I do not want anything. I mean, my ex-boyfriend, I ended it so harshly with him
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that I broke his heart. I never gave him
Yeah.
any reasons. I just said it's over. And sadly, I didn't know the reasons, right? I
Yeah,
just
you
knew
were
I was
not,
done.
yeah, stable.
But the Misty that he knew and was looking for, she's gone. Like, she's nowhere to be seen. So
Mm.
I want really nothing to do with him. But his friend, his name was Nick, he just wanted to be my friend and so he started coming over without the ex-boyfriend. And fast forward, we ended up having a relationship, and I ended up getting pregnant. And on my
Mm.
18th birthday, I found out I was pregnant.
Oh
And
man.
so, of course, with Nick, we were just like, well, we had a really good friendship and a good relationship. Not Shouldn't have got married, but
Yeah.
we were 18 and he was 17.
Oh
He was a
gosh.
year younger than me
Yeah.
at our high school. And so and all the girls liked him, and so there was a little bit of a confidence booster there as well, because
Right.
I
Right.
never
I've
really had,
got him. Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
hey, everybody's like, Nick is with Misty. Hey, it was just like, it
Mm-hmm.
was this big news. And so
Mm-hmm.
then I get pregnant, and we're like, okay, well, I guess we should just get married. In the 90s, that's what you did. Like, if
Yeah.
you got
You
pregnant,
did. Yeah.
you didn't do what people do today. Just
Right.
like, oh, well, jump ship, go abort, go do
Right.
what, it was, well, let's
Get
do this.
married
And
for the
so,
baby. Yeah.
right. And so I found that out on my 18th birthday. I quit doing drugs. I was getting drugs from my cousins who lived close by, and I told them, please, if I ask again, don't let me have it. I'm, you know, having a baby. And so I kind of slept that off. Um, so that's how my drugs started,
Mm.
and that's how
Mm.
they ended the first time.
Mm.
So we get married, and I have this baby. And then when that baby is 6 months old, my parents tell me the news that just shook my world. And that
Right.
was that I was adopted.
I just can't believe they
And
waited to now to tell you. And that just,
it was, it was like 20 years. You
what
waited
compelled them
20
to
years.
tell you at that point?
Oh, you know what? The only reason they told me was because I had a cousin who had put together a book, a
A
genealogy book,
genealogy. Yeah.
and
And you
she
weren't
had
going to be in it.
noted, no, she noted at the bottom that I was adopted.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and so they even said when they handed me the manila envelope, like, we were never going to tell you. They
Wow.
never, they would have never told me.
But they,
But right, but that because my cousin did this, and I just believe it's the hand of God. Obviously, my book is called He Was Always There, and that's because throughout my life, I can look back at all those times, even though I didn't know the Lord. He
yeah.
was there
Yeah.
wooing me and ta- you know taking care of me.
Right.
He was in
Oh, girl,
the
you could
mix.
have died
And
so many times in that short
oh
time
yeah,
frame. So many
I know. And
times.
there are so many, yeah, and I'm just scratching the surface. So these are just like pinpoints, of
Mm-hmm.
course, in my
Mm-hmm.
life because
Mm-hmm.
and so then I find out I'm adopted. Well, within 3 days, I find my birth mom.
Oh, wow. That was
And
quick.
it was right. It was very easy. But my whole adoption was set up. It was just my my parents had adopted me. Their best friend. Okay, she had a son, and he was friends with this couple who just had a baby and decided to give it up for adoption.
Hmm.
And so it was all and the mom that adopted me had just lost a baby, which
Oh.
is another thing. Like she was pregnant. She lost she was 7 months pregnant. She lost a baby. She went
Oh.
in, had an emergency C-section, had to have a hysterectomy due to all the
Mm.
damage that had been done, and
Mm.
was told she was never going to have kids. And this is after trying for 10 years
Oh, bless
with,
him.
okay. And so they're home, and 2 days later, they get a call from her best friend and say, hey, my son knows this couple. They just had a baby, and the mom has decided to give her up, that she was a 16-year-old girl.
Mm.
And so my adoptive mom, of course, is like, I'm going to the hospital to get my daughter. Everybody thought she was having a nervous breakdown because they were like, your daughter is not here,
Yeah.
and 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 so coming from somebody who's lost a baby, I have a baby. Baby number 6 was had heart defects, and he lived 3 days.
Mm.
And I can't imagine 2 days after losing him, getting another baby in my hands.
Right.
That would have been the worst thing ever
Right.
for me.
Traumatic.
I would have
Yeah.
thought it would have been the best thing, but it would have been the worst thing for that
Mm.
baby,
Mm.
because didn't have time to grieve or anything.
Right. To go through the
So
grieving.
knowing this now, right, seeing how my parents raised me and held on to me like crazy, and my mom was
Mm-hmm.
just nuts and mentally unstable my
Mm-hmm.
entire life,
Mm-hmm.
which that's just another story.
Yeah.
I realized
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
I
You now
realized
know. Yeah.
why. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so anyway, through just one phone call to that son, I just said, hey, my name is Misty. I'm 20. I think my mom. Her name is Gail. And he's like, oh my gosh, she's been looking for you for 20 years because we moved away.
Mm.
You know, Gail still lives in the Illinois, Iowa
Oh,
area,
wow.
and we
Okay.
lived in Arizona. And
Yeah.
so she, just never knew that we left. And so she said so he says, she's been looking for you forever. Let me take your information, because of course we didn't have iPhones and
Right. Right.
email.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing like that. So he's like,
Yeah.
let me take your information and I'll have her call you. And so she ends up calling me like the next day, and it happened to be my 1 year wedding anniversary of
Ah.
my first marriage. And so I know that was no accident, and it's also her birthday. So
Ah.
my first wedding anniversary and her birthday were on the same day.
Ah.
And so we talked, and she describes herself, and she's just like, I'm 5'5", I have brown hair. I've always been told I have the biggest brown eyes. And
And you're just
those
like
were
her.
3 things.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I find out that I had a half brother and a half sister who lived in
Oh.
California, which was 6 hours from me.
Uh-huh.
And so that was exciting. They were only like 10 and 12.
Right.
And so they were young, but I found out about them. And anyway, we move forward in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I meet them, I meet her, and it's really great. But it also, because she was 36 and she was still dealing with, uh, she was an alcoholic
Mm.
and drug abuse, just all of those
All the
things.
addictions. Yeah.
And at 36, she was still dealing with that. Like she didn't
Oh,
even
she
have
had
custody
not
of her
gotten any
kids.
help. Yeah.
Well, maybe she thought she got help, but that's just always what she turned back to.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to her, we sounded alike, we talked a lot alike, and I started, and for a bit I just lost hope. I just think I was thinking, what's the why try, right?
Yeah.
This woman,
Yeah.
we are so much alike.
And this is
She
my
didn't even
life.
raise me,
Yeah.
and that was like nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
Wow. I was
Yeah.
just like, this is why, because the parents
Mind
that raised me,
blowing.
I am nothing like. right? There's
Mm-hmm.
no viable reason how I turned out the way I did
Right.
other than God. So,
Right.
so I kind of lost hope, but I went to visit her, and anyway, life, when I went to visit her, she introduced cocaine to me. Like we
Mm.
were drinking one night and she was just like, "Hey, have you ever tried cocaine? This will sober us up." And and hey, I don't blame her at all. Like I was willing. I was like,
Yeah.
"Sure, why
You
not?
didn't
I'm on
stand up to
vacation.
it. Yeah.
I'll be fine when I go back home." You know,
Right.
my son was 1.5 now, and so I was like, "Oh, I'm not breastfeeding anymore. This will be okay." I mean,
Yeah.
people do this every
We
now and
always
then.
find excuses and whys to do it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so we did that. I liked it. And when I got back home from that visit from Illinois, I then went back to my cousins and I dove into drugs again.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that was my second time. And I was, this time I was doing crack because that's all that was available at the time. And I didn't even know what the difference was. I was just,
Mm-mm.
this is how you do it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
but I was more of a functioning addict at this time because I
Right.
had to, right?
That's
I
what I
had
was
a
telling you
child
about my
and
son-in-law. Yeah. Same thing.
yes, just
Functioning.
functioned. But I did disengage from people in life, and that was a thing.
Right.
But fast forward a little bit, my marriage isn't going so hot. Um, we just we just grew the wrong way, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
both came. We did not have a good foundation. Neither one of us knew what we were doing.
Right.
Neither one of us had the tools. So we made so many mistakes, built so many walls,
Mm-hmm.
and just didn't know what we were doing. And
And then you
so,
had drugs back in your life that were.
and I had right,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't even really notice. I mean, he had a different job all the time. He was always
Mm-hmm.
trying different, get rich this, do
Mm-hmm.
that, and so there were those issues. But the marriage wasn't going well.
Mm.
And then I found out I got pregnant with baby number two,
Oh goodness.
and that was a rough one because I found out at about 20 weeks,
Ooh.
and I didn't know I was 20 weeks,
And you were drugging.
and I had been doing drugs, yeah.
Mm.
And so I was very open and honest with my doctor, just because he was an
'Cause you
old-fashioned
knew.
guy,
Yeah.
and I wanted him to hold me accountable, and I needed him to know so that
Mm-hmm.
there, and so because of the drug use, I had placenta previa, so I had to actually have a C-section to
Mm.
have her, and that was like my biggest fear in my whole life at that time, right? And here I am. It was like but it was my fault. Um, so I had her at 33 weeks for an emergency C-section,
Mm.
and she was healthy. She was just very small.
Mm.
Um, and but there have been a lot of things
Later.
throughout her life
Yes.
that are completely because of that.
Yes. I see
And
that in
so
my grandchildren.
yes, it is. It's a real thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
um, and so of course I stopped doing drugs when I got pregnant, and go through the pregnancy, go through a year of breastfeeding or whatever, and my marriage is done. It's
No
not going to
more.
work.
Yeah.
My ex put the ring on the counter, and I knew he was bluffing. He liked to do that, but I knew him doing that. It was like the next day he'd be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, let's not."
Right.
But
Right.
I
Right.
I was done, so I took that and I ran with it. And I left. I took my two kids and I left, and went to my aunt's house, and the next day went out and got an apartment. Like when I think
Just
back to how these things all, I'm like, we just did it.
a
Like
cycle. Yeah.
yes, it was just a cycle. I got an apartment, and now I've got this 5 and this 2-year-old, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. I know we're getting divorced. Like
Mm.
I just have no, and so then, okay, so now that life is over, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm I meet my current husband. Well, we meet online when it's not really cool.
Yeah.
Back in like 2003, matchmaker.com
Oh, yeah.
was
I
our
met
thing.
online. I did the same.
Um, and I didn't even want to meet anybody, but I had this friend who was 10 years older than me, who, people older than me, technology was always a difficult thing
Mm-hmm.
at
Mm-hmm.
that point. And so she's like, "Hey, I need you." She's like, "I want to meet someone, and there's this matchmaker.com thing. I want you to make a profile. Let's make profiles." And
Let's try it.
help me. And I'm like, well, I'm like, I'll make you a profile. I don't want a man. Like, I'm not even divorced. I don't need anybody else to. It
Mm,
was just, I wanted to be alone. I was good
right.
at that point. And she's like, no, you need your own profile so that anytime I ask a question, you'll know how to answer it. And I'm like, whatever. Okay. So I do this profile, and and this guy and they match you up to your questions, you know.
Right.
So I'm immediately matched, but I didn't put a profile picture because I didn't want to meet anybody. So
Right.
I was like, I'm not doing this. And she goes, this isn't fair. You have to put a picture up. So I finally put a picture up, and and I meet this guy, and his name's Matt,
Mm-hmm.
and he asked if we, hey, you want to go on a date? I'm like, I'm not dating anybody on this thing. And then
This is just
my
crazy stuff.
sister, I know. It was just like not happening. Well, my sister, who was turning 18, she was coming for a visit from California, and she was like, "Sister, it's the first time you're not married. Let's go on a date. Can you get some guys to go find guys to do a double date?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, I might be able to."
Yeah.
And so I had reached back out to Matt, and I was just like, "Hey, if you can find a guy around 18, then I'll go on a date with you." And he's like, okay, let me see what I can do. And so comes back a few minutes later, and of course finds a guy, and we end up going on a double date, and I'm feeling things I've never felt. And
Mm.
we'll just fast forward.
Mm-hmm.
We end up we this is April we meet. He ends up moving into my apartment in
Mm-hmm.
May.
Mm-hmm.
We get a house together in June. Mind you, everybody thinks we're nuts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're
My friends are
crazy.
telling
Yeah.
him, run, man, you do not know her. I'm telling him to run. Like and I've got these two kids. He's this
Yeah.
25-year-old young guy who just loves to have fun and do all the fun things. And the last thing he needs is
It's
a
two more
woman with two
children.
kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so, but we just were going for it. We get a house together, and we would have gotten married sooner. We were waiting for my divorce to be final.
Right.
And so we'll just fast forward. The divorce is final. We end up getting married in January of 2003. And of course, a little bit before that, my addiction came back,
Mm.
because, well, I had seen a picture and I was really heavy, and I was like, "Ooh, we're gonna get married. I want to lose some weight."
And you figured the
And
drugs would
him
do
and
it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and him and he was one of those guys that could do drugs on the weekend for fun, and then that was
And be
it.
done.
And
Yeah.
I hadn't told him about my history with drugs, so I pretended like, "Oh yeah, I can do that."
Mm.
Right? And so, but I couldn't, and I
Mm-mm.
learned that really quick. But he was different than my ex, and he noticed
He
immediately.
did.
He noticed things immediately. He would ask me questions, and I'd be like, "What are you talking about?"
Not me. No.
And then he would have visions of where I would hide my drugs,
Mm.
which later, of course, now we know that was the Lord,
Yeah.
because how in the world can you find a tiny bag of things everywhere in the house,
Yeah.
right? It didn't matter
Yeah.
where I put it.
He
He would
found
find
it.
it, and it would bother me so much. I would be so mad, but I
Yeah.
would deny it and act like it was somebody else's, and I would make him feel bad. And I did all the things an
Mm.
addict does,
Mm.
okay? But I'm like, we're going to stop. Well, of course, I find out I'm pregnant again,
Oh
okay?
man.
So, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
my
Something how
first
babies
three
can do that.
pregnancies. I know. It's like that was how the Lord knew. It was pretty much the only thing
That would
that would
stop
make me
you.
stop.
Yeah.
And it would only be because it was no longer about me. Like,
Right.
I
Right.
just believed the drugs don't hurt anybody but me. Let me
Right.
do it and leave me be, right?
Right.
But when the baby is there, that's different. And so we found out we were pregnant 3 weeks before our wedding, and I was so mad because I was like,
Oh.
I wanted to do this right this time, like,
Yeah.
meaning get married, then get pregnant,
Yeah.
right? But so we didn't tell anybody because we didn't want people
No.
thinking,
Talking
his,
about
his
it at the
parents were already
wedding.
telling
Yeah.
him I was not the person for him. I mean, his parents were like, "You're not to marry her. She's using you for her money. She's
Oh.
divorced, go
Yeah.
find somebody else." Um, and so we were just kind of on our own. We had a wedding with 40 people. We paid for it ourselves. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like, just people, our close knit people.
Right. Right. Your
Short
day.
shortly after that, his parents moved. His mom and stepdad moved to Florida, and they said, "Hey, we are retiring over at this little Fort Walton Beach, Florida. if you guys are up for it, come this way. You can live with us till you find a place or get settled. We would
Oh,
love to have you. And
wow.
so we looked it up, and it was like, oh, most beautiful beaches
Right. Right.
in the States, whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I didn't really care for the beach because the only beach I knew was the California beach,
Right.
and it's
Right.
cold. And I was like,
Windy
I'm
all
not
the
really a
time.
beach
Yeah.
person. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Matt was like, well, I love the beach, and I think this would be great. And so I got my ex-husband to sign off on me taking the kids just by
Right. Taking
waiving
them out
child
of
support.
town. Yeah.
I was just like, hey, I won't make you pay. I knew that he would say yes, and I
Yep.
also knew he would regret it, but I didn't care
Right. Right.
because, and so I was like, I'm going to take my shot because I need to do this for our family.
Right.
We really thought that like by changing zip code, it might change my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I would leave the 20 some years of Phoenix and all that was there
Mm-hmm.
to, just all of that. And
Right.
so we, in July, we moved to Florida. We had our two kids. They were 6 and 4 or 7 and 4 at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're moving to Florida, and I'm 30 weeks pregnant with with our with his first child, but my third.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to Florida, and we learn later on. I'm going to fast forward. We
Yeah.
learn that zip code does not change hearts.
Yeah.
So I ended up when Dylan, which that's what we named the baby, when she was a year and a half, I found drugs again. And
So easy to
so
find,
that's
aren't they?
really, they were,
The
and
connections.
it is,
Mm.
it is, if you're looking, it is.
Yeah.
But if you're not and you don't know, then you would never know. It's
Mm-hmm.
all around you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I, of course, I found a way to do that again and tried to hide it. We had opened a business at that time, so I kind of used my weight loss and things like that,
For
stress,
working. Yeah.
as
Mm-hmm.
an excuse, like, oh yeah, it's all the working and all this. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, slowly as time goes on, then Matt finds it again in the house, and it it really he felt betrayed, and this went on for about 18 months.
Mm.
So it was my longest bout of addiction,
Mm.
and I was fully functioning. We had 3 kids. We were uh, he worked for he's a contractor. He builds
Mm-hmm.
homes.
Mm-hmm.
But when we moved here, he didn't have his license. He just had to worked
Right.
for a
He had to do that.
contractor.
Yeah.
And we opened a small business that was like an indoor play place for kids, kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a gymboree,
Yeah.
because there wasn't one here, but we
Right.
called it something different. And I was over running that, never ran a business, never did anything. And I'm thinking employees are just going to be my ticket,
Right.
not
Right.
knowing that employees are your worst enemy, not your
Right.
best friend.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that though. And nobody
Yeah.
told me. And even if they tried, I wouldn't have listened. I was
Right.
like, I
I
just
can
thought
do this.
yeah. So that was just a year of hell because I
Mm-hmm.
was running this business, functioning addict.
Now, were you still doing
Um,
like meth or cocaine, both,
yeah,
or?
no,
Yeah.
I was doing meth.
Yeah.
I was doing meth, but this time I didn't smoke it or anything. I was just sniffing it. And I really, in my mind, I felt like I had it under control.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
even at one point when Matt would continue to find it, I mean, and it was rough. I mean, we
Yeah.
fought a lot. He punched
Yeah.
holes in walls.
Yep.
He never hit me, but he punched holes in walls
Yes. So
out of
much anger.
frustration of my,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember, I'll never forget looking at him and just saying, can you just let me do it? I've got this under control.
Mm.
Nobody knows I do it. I've
It'll
got
be
this.
our
Just let me
secret.
be, and
Yeah.
we won't have any more problems. And he's looking at me. He's like, "What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
And
But you're
so,
addicted, and so you don't see that, what he's seeing.
right,
Yeah.
right. I don't. I really felt like I had it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up selling our business, which was a miracle. And
Mm.
because in my mind it was like, okay, if I'm going to stop, I've got to sell the business.
Right.
I can't run the business. And so our oldest son at the time had asked us to sell the business because he missed mom. Because I went from being a stay-at-home mom to be at all the
All
field
the
trips
time gone.
to
Yeah.
to be in the classrooms to whatever to
Mm-hmm.
working 7 days a week. And while
Mm-hmm.
people would be like, "Oh, I bet your kids love this," I'm like, "Yeah."
No.
After the first week,
Yeah. Now they hate it.
no, we did like 80 birthday parties that year,
Oh,
80
wow.
just parent night out. Like we weren't just there during the day. We did evenings. Like it was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it just wasn't what. So we sold
Healthy.
that, and and after that, our kids are like they wanted to go to church, which is crazy. Like, why
Oh,
do you want to go to? They wanted to
yeah.
go to a church
Yeah.
because we live in the Bible Belt now,
Yes.
right? Like this
Yes.
is
There's
where
churches on every
people,
corner.
right? Everybody goes to church,
Uh-huh.
whether they, everybody goes to church, but that doesn't mean they all love the Lord, right?
Right. Right.
So, but our kids are wanting to go to church because their friends are going to church, and
Mm.
so we're like, okay, well, we'll once we sell the business, we'll try to go to church. So we sell it, and January 1, we're of oh 06 now, we're free.
Mm-hmm.
And so in February, we start going to church.
Mm.
And we just chose a local church where my youngest was going to a preschool at the church.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
And it was just a local like and so I was like, well, we know people there. We already shake people's hands. We're already there for a lot of things. Let's just go there because I'll know
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start going there, and very first worship service I've ever been in, because I went to a Mormon
Right.
church all those
Right.
years, right?
Different.
And
Yeah.
so this is a praise and worship service.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what, but we get in there and these songs start playing, and I'm bawling. Like I
Mm.
am crying, and I'm hiding my addiction right now still. So even
Yeah.
though Matt thinks from January 1st we've made this new covenant that I'm not going to, and I'm thinking I just got to get extra better at hiding it,
Mm.
right? I'm just got to
I'll
be, and
figure out a
so
way.
I'm
Yeah.
right. I'll figure out a way to do it to where how I can do it. So this I'm crying, and I do not want to be. I go to the bathroom, and I'm not just teary, like ugly crying.
You're
Like
right.
I don't
Right.
like it. This is uncomfortable. I waited for worship to be over, went back in, and his message was Super Bowl marriage, and it was just like we've always had a great marriage. We've
Mm.
always had great intimacy, but
Mm-hmm.
the things he was saying, we were just like, whoa, but we don't have that,
Yeah.
right? And so it was, I enjoyed hearing it. It was really convicting. And Matt's like, oh, I want to come back. This was great. Our kids had a great time. And I was like, I don't want to come back to another worship service. Like, I don't know what
Mm.
happened, but I could
Mm.
not control myself.
Yeah.
And so over the next several weeks, I would either make us late so we'd miss the worship, or I would pretend to be sick so they could go, and I would just stay home and do my drugs. And
Yeah. While they're out
that went
worshiping.
on,
Yeah.
right. That went on for a while. And
Mm.
so April comes, okay, and I'm invited to this birthday dinner. At this time, I really don't have close friends.
Right.
I have a lot of friends, but I'm
But
not
nobody that you
like,
can
I don't have
confide in.
intimate,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Nobody that I'm like having these quiet, intimate talks with,
Right.
nothing like
Right.
that. So I go to this birthday dinner, and it's like with 12 or 13 ladies, and at the end they're all talking about how the next day they were going to go to the beach and have a beach day, and they're like, Misty, you should come. And I was like, yeah, I mean, maybe I could. I'm thinking I could do a beach day with all these people. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's safe, so I do it. But when I get there, only one lady shows up.
Oh, wow.
It's just the birthday girl, and
Oh,
nobody else could make it. And I knew her okay, but I didn't know her really well. She was
right.
just going through a really bad divorce, and
Oh.
her kids were friends with my kids,
Mm-hmm.
and so and we kind of traveled in groups together, like to
Mm-hmm.
Disney and different things, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know her very well. And so we just took that time to get to know each other, and we were just talking about different things. She had her Bible with her at the beach, and that was and and
That was
and
big.
I loved women that loved the Lord. Like
Yes.
I did. I thought, oh, yeah, please pray. Like
Yeah.
I
You
love that.
admired
I
them.
just didn't think it was for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew who I was,
Mm-hmm.
right? I knew
Mm-hmm.
who I was and what I did, and I knew all the things, and
Unclean.
that was
Mm-hmm.
not going to be, I was not like them. And so, but I really loved how I loved that. And
Mm-hmm.
so um, but I was always like, they don't know the real me. And
Right.
so
Right.
this friend of mine, her name was Karen, and she starts talking about her college years, and how just sororities and drugs and alcohol. And I was like, oh wow, you've done that. Like it was
Yeah.
just kind of like, oh, you did that too. Okay. And then she's like, yeah, when's the last time you've ever done any drugs or anything?
Oh.
It was just such a weird question, right? And it fit with the conversation. But when I went to like to answer, which wasn't going to be the truth.
Right.
It was
You're
not.
gonna lie. Yeah.
I couldn't talk. Like
Mm.
I nothing would come out. And I just was like, well, I did the last of what I had this morning. And she's like,
Oh
what?
my gosh.
And I
Yeah.
was just, I am dying. I'm
Yeah.
just like,
I just said that.
wait,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, okay, I can say, just diet pills
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
marijuana or, like
Something
anything
silly. Yeah.
other than not, and she was like, what do you mean, girl? What did you do? And I was just like, and then I just said, I have been doing meth for the last 18 months. And
Mm.
I mean, I have it pretty much under control, but I've tried to stop and I can't. So now I
Mm.
just do it the best I can and, not letting it
Yeah.
invade anything in life. And she's looking, she's like, what?
She's blown away.
And I just want to say, just joking. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm dying. Like, I have never in my life up to that point admitted out of my mouth that I had an addiction to meth.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
I never, it was always like, oh no, I've just done that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I can do that. And so this like coming out was just like, she's just like, wait, what? She's like, girl, do
Mm.
you know Jesus? And I was like, what? She's like, do
Mm.
you believe in Jesus? Like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know
Yeah.
there's a God, there's a Jesus, I know there's a heaven, I know we were all created, but I mean, I don't know what you're asking. Yeah, I believe in Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
sure,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus loves me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and she's
Yeah.
like, Jesus can heal you, right? Like, what?
Mm.
Okay, yeah, no, I
I
don't
don't really know
know.
how that works.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, I've actually got to go get Dylan now. It was time to leave. And she's like, I want to pray with you. Let's pray with you. Can we pray? And I'm like, sure. But
Mm.
I'm literally, all I'm thinking of is
How can I
running
get out
and
of here?
thinking,
Yeah.
how am I going to save myself from this? How
Mm-hmm.
am I going to come back from what I
Mm-hmm.
just told her? So she ends up praying and I leave there and I'm not going to tell you the story of how I got saved in there because it's in my book. But what
Mm-hmm.
I am going to
Mm-hmm.
tell you is there was a week of events where God showed himself to me
Mm.
in a very real way that could only be him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a few days after that beach day of telling my pastor's wife, which was again like nuts,
Blown away. Yeah.
and ending that week with telling my husband on the beach, um, admitting to him all of those things, and then going back home and experiencing redemption through intimacy, something I had never ever
Mm. Mm.
experienced in all those years.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, that really began the story of the two of us walking with the Lord. That night
Awesome.
at the beach, we dropped to our knees. We said a prayer of salvation that we knew, and God picked our family up
Mm.
in that moment. And it's like He propelled us beyond any of the steps that normal people had to take.
To get where they
I
need
did
to be.
not, yeah, I didn't need any treatment. I didn't need nothing. God delivered
Mm.
me from that addiction,
Mm.
and He took my desire for drugs. Like I had people with me for a while, for a few
Yeah.
weeks, and
Yeah.
and after about that third week, I was finally alone, and I just remember sitting in my living room alone. My kids are at school, and I'm like, for the first time, I could have called to get some, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want it.
You didn't feel the need.
And
Mm.
no, and so that that was the beginning of our new life.
Mm.
And months later, we felt like the Lord was telling us to have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, ooh,
Again?
pregnancy and babies
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
always
That's a
like,
trigger.
it wasn't great
Mm-hmm.
usually. I
Mm-hmm.
I loved my kids, I did,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't love all the stuff that went into that because I was selfish
Yeah.
and I didn't like what it did to my body. And
Right.
it was all of those things. So that the thought of even like, what I want to, why am I even thinking of having a baby? He's
Right.
thinking of it, you know, we end up we do end up doing that, and baby number 4, and we named her Zoe. And the Lord then pretty much told us to give, well, give the number of our babies up to Him, right?
Mm.
Give control,
Mm-hmm.
let it go to Him.
Mm-hmm.
And after a year and a half of like letting that go and not getting pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
I decided I was going to take that control, and we were going to go get a vasectomy, and we were going to be done.
Mm.
And so in September of '09, that's what we did. We had an appointment to get a vasectomy, and we rescheduled this appointment 50 times,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's fine, it's finally time. It's like Friday of Labor Day weekend, and my husband's like, we're not rescheduling it. I'm done. We're
Mm.
gonna go. If we're not supposed to have any kids, God is gonna have to come down and like make it happen,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or stop this.
Right.
So we do, the next day we go, we get all our kids farmed out, and we're at this appointment, and hours in, while we're waiting, they came out and they were just like, I'm really sorry, but the doctor isn't going to do any more procedures today, but
Oh my
you can
goodness.
come back Tuesday. We'll get you first thing in Tuesday morning, but we forgot to sterilize the equipment, and we were
Mm-mm.
like, okay,
Mm-mm.
we'll wait. Like, how long does that take? We'll wait. She comes back out and she's like, I'm really sorry, but the doctor doesn't feel like doing any more procedures today. It's a holiday weekend, and he's just ready to go
He's ready to
home.
go. Yeah.
And I was like, if you would have said anything else, it would have been better. But like, he's sick. He doesn't,
Yeah.
whatever. He had
Yeah.
an emergency,
Right.
but he
Don't tell
doesn't
me he didn't
feel
want to
like
do
it.
anymore. Yeah.
Like, that was God, right?
Mm.
I'm like, no, this means God wants me to have more
Another
babies,
baby.
and I was just so done. But,
Yeah.
and so we left there. I got my money back, and I'm like, we're not returning. We left there. 2 weeks later, we found out we were pregnant, and I was
Mm.
like, "Yay! Oh, what a great story! Like, oh yes,
Yeah.
Lord, thank you.
Yeah.
This is so great. What a fun story to tell." But then fast forward, and we had a miscarriage at 10 weeks,
Mm.
and that was a season of loss. But what
Yeah.
that did,
It taught
it
you.
it gave us an appreciation for life,
Right.
because pregnancy was never something I had to work for, right? It always
Right.
came, and I never
Right.
appreciated it,
Yeah.
and I didn't have that desire to, like, I want to be pregnant. And
Right.
so by that loss, we desired pregnancy. And
Mm-hmm.
so we then got pregnant a few months later, with another girl. And at this point, my husband's like, all right, I know we were going to, let's try for a boy. Like, let's just
Keep one more
try for a
time. One
boy.
more time.
Right, one more time. And so we do try for one more time, and we do get pregnant with the boy. And it's very exciting. But at 20 weeks, we find out that boy's got some serious heart defects.
Mm.
And they actually recommend terminating pregnancy. We're not going to do that.
No.
We're like, we're not the givers and takers of life. So we do
No.
walk through that. He does defy all the things that they say, but he only lives 3 days, and then he
Mm.
passes. And so that was a huge
Another
loss.
loss. Yeah.
And but of course, I knew when I found out he had all those, it was like, no, that means I'm going to be pregnant again,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Because you're
I
not
knew
done.
my husband's heart. Yes, I knew his heart. I knew he
Mm-hmm.
wanted a son, and I always wanted a little brown boy that looked like my husband too.
Yes. Yes.
I did. It just and so so we lose that one, and I'm like, all right, we're going to get pregnant again. So months later, we do get pregnant with baby number 8, and this is going to be a boy, because God took my boy,
Right.
so He's
Right.
going to give me a boy.
Right.
Um, or actually, it's baby number 7. Yeah, this is 7, and so she, well, I'm pregnant with this child, and 2 days before we have our ultrasound to find out what she is, I have a friend, yeah, I have a friend call me and say, "Hey, I've got this young mom. She's pregnant with a 5-year-old. She's getting ready to be kicked out of her home. I know you and Matt do a lot with the shelters and stuff. Do you know what? Do you have any ideas, or a place that she can go where her daughter can come with her? Because most shelters don't take
Right. Right.
5-year-olds."
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, I am 5 months pregnant. I don't even want to deal with, like, why are you calling me? That was
Right.
my thought.
Right.
Like, but I couldn't shake the call. The Lord wouldn't let me drop it.
Mm.
So a day later, I called her back and I was like, you know what, you guys can come over for dinner and let's just meet and we'll see what we can help her somehow. Like, we'll figure out something.
Right.
Like, I'll figure, we have a lot of resources. I want to help this girl because the Lord's not letting me forget about her. So they come over for dinner, and after dinner, when all the kids go play, I'm sitting there with my friend and the mom and my husband, and we're just kind of talking, and I just kind of heard the voice of, just having a son. That's your promise. I'm
Mm,
like, what?
mm,
Like she's looking like she's wanting it. So she's looking for a family.
yeah.
And I kind of looked around and I was a little startled and they were just like, "Are you okay?" And like, you know what? No, I'm not. And I'm one that I will just say I'm kind of bold. I'm out there. I just
Mm-hmm.
say things, right? And I was like, "Look, are you pregnant with a boy? Are you looking for a family to adopt a baby?" And she looked at my friend like she had betrayed her. And
Oh.
I was just like, "Oh my gosh." I said, I she didn't tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Then she's like, "She didn't tell you." I'm like, "She didn't tell me.
You just
I
felt it.
just heard that.
Yeah.
And so um fast forward, I call my doctor and I tell her, or we go to my ultrasound the next day. And I don't walk in all like, "Yes, show me. I can't wait to see it's a boy." I'm kind of just like, "Let's get this party going.
Yes. Yes.
Show me, because if this is a girl, then I know what
You know
my
what it
next year
is.
is going to
Yeah.
be."
Yeah.
And it was a girl. And so the mom moves in with us with her 5-year-old, and we're pregnant together, and we go to appointments together, and
Oh.
we end up adopting her son.
Oh.
And now I've got two babies, right?
At the
Instead of
same
so
time.
he
Oh my
The
goodness.
Lord takes one and he gives me two,
Yeah.
and they're 10 weeks apart.
Oh.
And I was done, right? That was it for our
Mm-hmm.
family, and
Mm-hmm.
until they were like one and a half. And then my husband was like, "So honey, I know I'm supposed to get snipped tomorrow, and I know you're turning 40 this weekend, but I feel it. We've got to try one more time,
Oh.
because Izzy needs a brother. He's in this house with five girls, and he needs a brother," because my oldest son had left long before, like around that time. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. He
there's
was
a
old
there
enough. Yeah.
he was old enough, and he just wanted to live his own way, so he
Mm-hmm.
kind of left.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was no other boys. And so my husband's like, "He really," and I just still have that desire for, I just know I have a son. I'm like, "All right,
Oh,
okay."
bless him.
So I'm like, "All right, but I get to do all the things all the people told me to do to
Mm-hmm.
have a baby,
Mm-hmm.
a boy."
Mm-hmm.
And this is like 2 weeks before Christmas. And so I'm like, "We'll start in April." I'm like looking at the Chinese calendar, which I know has no bearing,
We're
but
doing
but
all this
but
stuff.
I
Yeah.
I was reaching for whatever it was. I mean, I
Exactly.
bought all the tools, all the things that people said for all the things. I'm like, "We're gonna know
Mm-mm-mm.
my son." I'd only had like 1 month of a cycle because I finished breastfeeding. So I
Right.
wasn't even, I'm
Right. So
like,
you weren't even. Yeah.
we're gonna wait a few months. Well, 2 weeks later on Christmas Day, I found out I was pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah. And so I couldn't, and it happened to be on my birthday weekend. So the Chinese calendar, I couldn't even
Everything.
follow that because it was different if I got pregnant on my birthday or before. And so the Lord really made me have faith. But
Uh-huh.
it is our long awaited boy. So
Oh.
so here we are. Here we are today in 2023. Our kids are 6 to 26. I have 9 of them.
Wow.
I'm a homeschool mom. I have five left in the home that I homeschool, but then I have my 23-year-old daughter who is home with her 1-year-old. She lives here. She's been here for she moved here when her son was born.
Oh.
Um, then I have my 19-year-old. Well, she sleeps across, so we live on 10 acres, and
Uh-huh.
grandma and grandpa live in the house across the way. And so my 19-year-old lives over there because her boyfriend, fiance, whatever we call him,
Uh-huh.
is upstairs in the guest room, and our house is full of
Right.
life.
Right.
We love the Lord, um, and for many years, the the Lord people have been telling me I would write a book. Right,
Mm-hmm.
that's really
Mm-hmm.
where the book comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Many years along my journey of all the ups and downs, and the losses and the gains and the
Mm-hmm.
trials and the
Mm-hmm.
triumphs, people would say, "Oh,
Write a
you need to
book.
write a book." It
Yeah.
it was a funny joke for a very long time because every week I would get it just one time. And so I would be like, okay, well, I wonder who it's going to be this week, Lord, or I
Yeah.
wonder how it's going to happen. And it would either be a comment on a post or just, but it would happen. I would
Right.
hear,
Right.
you're going to write a book. So for forever, I was like, Lord, bring me a ghostwriter, please. I've heard about these ghostwriter people that I can just tell my story to,
And let
and
them
they'll
write
make it
it.
into a book,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, Lord, that's what I need. I don't have time to write a book. I don't like writing. I
Right.
like math. I
Uh-huh.
don't like writing.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, give me numbers and give me facts and I can do that.
Yeah.
Don't tell me to go write. And so, years and years and years go by and no ghostwriters come. And last year, in January of 2022, I felt like the Lord gave me the title. I was like telling a friend the story, and I was just like, he was just always there. And then I heard, there's your title. And that was always my reason for not starting. I was
Right.
always like,
Because you
I don't
didn't
even
think,
have
well, I don't
a
have a
title. Like,
title. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what it is. And I would try all these, a life redeemed, the redeemed life, and
Yeah. None of it
none of
fit.
it,
Yeah.
no. And then I would think of others and they were already titled to books. And so I didn't want to,
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, I just don't have one. So he gave me the title and it was like, this is your year. And
Mm.
I was like, oh, this is my year to write a book? What?
Really? Yeah.
I'm like, are you
But
kidding me?
Lord. Yeah.
And so it was a very therapeutic process.
I
It
bet it
took me
was.
9 months to write 3 chapters, and I was
Mm.
about ready to give up.
Yeah.
And I was done. In September, I was just like, okay,
Nah.
Lord, I've done all, it's not working. These 3 chapters I even wrote aren't even great.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm like, so I asked my husband to pray on a Friday night. I was just like, can we just pray? And just like, if I need to lay it down for another 7 years, I'm okay. I don't
Exactly.
need to
However
be
long
I'm
it
not looking
takes.
to do this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of prayed. And then that Sunday morning, this woman comes up to me and she's this Black woman who I love. And she comes up to me and she's like, girl, I was praying for you this morning and the Lord told me to tell you, you just need to get on it. And
Ah.
I'm like, and she goes, and I know that I figured you'd want to know what that was for. So I asked him. And she goes, remember when you shared your testimony on a few months ago, that 5-minute thing, and I asked you if you ever thought of writing a book? She goes, and I'm sitting there, I'm just like getting teary
Mm-hmm.
eyed. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm pretty sure that's what it's about. And I was like, oh my gosh,
I
and I
can't
just
believe
start
this.
weeping. But
Yes.
and she's like, oh, I lead worship, so I'm like, I gotta go up there. I'll tell you after what, I'll just tell you after. And so I end up, messaging her after just to
Yeah.
tell her why that was so pertinent and why
Mm-hmm.
it was so significant.
Mm-hmm.
And that that day, I booked a condo in Panama City Beach, which is close by where we live.
Right.
Um, During a week that my husband was going to be out of town, and had somebody come stay with the kids. And I was like, Lord, I'm
This
giving
is
you
my
these 4
time.
days.
Yep.
I've got 4 days to finish this book. And it was the first week in October. I'm like, I have 4 days. So it's, I'm opening up. If this is anything, I
Right.
need it to happen. And
Right.
so I wrote the other 10 chapters
Mm.
in those 4 days. And then
Mm.
I took the next 2 months to just kind of fix it
Get it all
and go over
together.
it.
Yeah.
And then December 1st, I sent it to an editor, and um, and here we are. And so it's going to release in April, and it's not real. It doesn't feel real. And I think when I actually hold the book in my hand, maybe it will, but
You're still in awe
it's
of
still not.
yourself. Yes. Yes. That
I'm
you
I'm
actually
still
did
in
this.
awe
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
like it's yes. And so it had things in it that my husband didn't even know.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's been, it has things in
Another
it that a
process
lot
of
of
healing.
people that
Mm.
don't, right, that don't know. So it will ruffle feather. It's going to ruffle some feathers,
Yeah.
but out of obedience, I want people to know no one's ever too far gone. Like
No.
I really
No.
thought for most of my life, the first 30 years of my life, that if you all knew what I really did, you would know why I don't, the Lord wouldn't, he doesn't want me, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Um, but somehow we're just never too, like his grace.
It's
That is
grace
really
upon grace. That's
the I never learned about grace when I in any church I went to, or and it's His grace. I
Yeah.
mean, that it's
Yeah.
just, and it's only by His grace that I have all the kids that I have, and that
And you
I've
are where you are
written this
today.
book, and that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I have an amazing husband. We just celebrated 20 years.
Oh,
We have the marriage of, I mean, our marriage is a
rock
20
solid.
on a scale of
Mm-hmm.
1 to 10, and
Mm-hmm.
we love to inspire other marriages. It's just kind
Mm-hmm.
of our heart, and um, we used to be the youngest in our friend groups, and now we are
You're
the
the
oldest
oldest.
with the
Yeah.
oldest
Yeah.
kids and the oldest
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
longest. It's like people look to us now. I'm like, don't look to me.
Yeah, I
Do
know.
not come to me
For
don't
any
copy
kind of
me. I
advice.
promise. It's always going to be the harder way. Don't,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I like to jump ship and take risks,
Mm.
and we'll just be radical for the Lord. And He knows that. And so my
I
book
love
is
that
filled
word.
with so many stories of our us being radical for the
Yes.
Lord.
Yes.
And today I just touched on some of the very significant ones, but all the things in between, um, it's it's pretty. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
God is real. God
Yes,
is
he
real.
is.
And
Yes, he is. And I love that word
um,
radical. We talked about it last night, and forgiveness. You know, a lot of times we forgive people, but we just kind of do it in a, oh, I forgive you. Don't worry about it. But
right,
radical forgiveness. That's deep,
right.
you know, when you do something
It
like
is.
that, because God is radical with us. I mean, oh, and the grace. If he didn't show me the grace every day that he does, I wouldn't be where am today. Because,
Right,
you know, I
right.
can't do life without him. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Well, Misty, I appreciate you, girl. I appreciate you telling us your story and where it's led you to today and how God's grace has been upon you over all that time. Because, like I said, there was many times you shouldn't be here today, you know,
no,
the
I
choices you
know.
made. And a lot of people think are in the living the life you're living with the Lord and the relationship you have with him, because so many think, well, I'm too far gone. There's no way he would not forgive me. I'm just a lost cause. And
Right.
you're
Or she's so
not.
lucky.
Yeah.
She's so
Oh
lucky.
yeah,
She's
look
so,
at her.
it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
oh man,
yeah.
you just
And that's
no
not the
idea.
case. That's not the case.
Right.
He takes you as you are, and you turn around
Yeah.
and become new. So I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart to saying yes. And I know this is going to impact others. And I want to get all your information, like I said, to send it to me so I can put that on this when we air it, about your book, about, you know, just some story, a little bit of bio about you, and then we'll publish this. And I look forward to my community hearing you. And I just want to
Yeah.
thank you
Thank
again.
you. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining my podcast today. We all have a story to share. Each story has purpose and makes an impact to you, the listener, creating a journey with passion and purpose. The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Please share with others and subscribe below.